I'd like to welcome everybody today to a discussion we're going to have here with Dr. Timothy Boyette. And I have a question to ask, and then we're going to kind of see how this discussion unfolds. But what do you think has happened, or with the last 3 years, what do you think has really happened, and what's your take on how things have gone within our country, within individually? What do you think, or what have you seen over the last few years?
How long do you have?
Yeah, it's going to take some time. It's true.
No,
a lot to unpack.
I kind of have seen. I saw this about a year and a half ago, and I really have tried to get this out to people as best possible. Mm-hmm. That if we can look at the last 3 years and recognize that we can learn a lot from the last 3 years, I believe 3 principles we can really focus on in order to get us past this time and get to a new reality is compassion, liberty, and empowerment. And if we can focus on those 3 subjects or principles, that'd be where I'd learn the most and or see the most from what's happened, and then how to then proceed into this next component to get away from where we've just been.
So it was compassion, liberty, what was the third one?
Empowerment.
Empowerment, wow, I like that. Compassion, yeah, let's hit on that a little bit. Do you think, did we see as a whole in our country, in the world I guess, our society acting and reacting to things with a lot of compassion?
I think there was some, and I think a lot of people thought that just when you fall into fear and you fall into challenge and you're told that the sky is falling for 3 years, your fear level and anxiety and tension and all that goes to a certain extent that compassion becomes secondary, even though you think what you're doing by being protected or secure or stable, you feel like you're being compassionate. I think though that turned into a little bit of like there's division. There's division against those who were masking versus those who weren't. Those who kept their businesses open versus those who were told to shut down and didn't shut down or did shut down. Those who took a vaccine or didn't take a vaccine. Yeah. Those who didn't send their kids to school and those who did send their kids to school. And you had these divisions that provided a problem for compassion that I think was lost in a lot of people. Yeah. And so when I look at compassion, I think the best example of compassion is that in the life of Jesus when he encounters the leper. And if you think about the leper of that time, the most diseased person who was feared by everyone. Right. Jesus, it says in scripture, Jesus was led by compassion to reach out his hand to that leper and to be with him and be in his presence. And that to me is the ultimate picture of compassion, which I think we've lost because you had in the beginning, people were scared of anyone with a sniffle. Yeah. Why? Because here we're being carted around in these big corporations like cattle because they're of these processes that they put in place in order to mitigate the spread of this disease. And so we now know that a lot of those things were misguided. And so I saw a lot of lack of compassion during that time. You had even doctors who weren't treating COVID patients. They wouldn't be seen in offices. And so, again, and a lot of patients were treated well remotely, and we did a lot of that as well to try and avoid exposure. But it went to a certain extent where anyone who had any shred of exposure to someone who had COVID or had a sniffle or because they had allergies were treated with no compassion and were treated as a leper. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
What's interesting to me too, we saw that on the individual level, but then also corporate level. I mean, my personal story there and your personal story as well. And it's a long story, but I did not receive much compassion through my former employer. And you're right. I don't think through this whole time, individually, corporately, government, like as a whole, compassion was not a priority. Right. And that definitely affected and impacted our country, our culture, our world, our society in a negative way. For sure.
And I can learn from that too, because I've had the same issues with people who are still masking or still fearful. And I have to recognize that no, they're actually truly fearful because they've been programmed to be in fear.
Yeah.
Certainly some people are doing it for political realms or reasons, and they may have difficulty with other issues of their life, but the point is like, I'm supposed to be compassionate first.
Yeah, true.
You know, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Those are the fruits of the Spirit, and when I'm not living in those fruits of the Spirit, I know there's a disbalance in my life that I need to kick out to get back to my level, or a level of compassion.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, that was the first one. Number 2,
Liberty.
So yeah, that's obviously a huge thing that over the last few years, a vast majority of people, and a lot of people unknowingly, gave it up and lost a lot of their natural God-given liberty and rights. And so, yeah, let's unpack that a little bit.
Liberty. So I think liberty implies value, right? So the fact that I can say, hey, you have the ability to make a decision to chart your course. And the Declaration says that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, those being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so I think it's kind of interesting that, you know, first in the Declaration of Independence, it says we're endowed by our Creator, and then it outlines what those rights are. And so it's just so interesting to me that I believe that those who gave up their liberty quickest don't recognize where liberty comes from. It doesn't come from government, it comes from God. Yeah. And if we can recognize that fact, then government has to comply to that, because we're supposed to be a government of and by and for the people. And so I believe we need to get back to the fact that liberty is provided by God, not by government. And then that's where that balance is. I think the founders knew that beautifully. And that's why that was put into the Declaration of Independence. And I believe that, again, kind of going back to Scripture, just we're made in the image of God. Being made in the image of God imparts value to individuals, and that value in individuals then lends to or allows for liberty to be acknowledged. If we're in a godless, random universe that was not created, then it's kind of a dog-eat-dog world where there's really no true inherent objective value. Therefore, there's no true inherent objective liberty. And so if you get God out of everything, which that's what a lot of governments and political forces want to do, then of course they can take away liberty. So I think it's so important to recognize that God is the foundation and the foundational justification of liberty. Yeah.
I think we're reaping the benefits now. It doesn't take long to turn on the news and see that we are in a world of chaos, you know, and with God there is order, there is structure, there is, you know, life. And without God, if you want a godless society, then you're going to reap the benefits of that chaos and disorder, you know, and that's what we're kind of witnessing right now. But yeah, so then the third one was empowerment. And I know that here at Held Truth Life, we do, I love that, you know, we empower our patients to make better lifestyle choices, to watch, you know, like we talked about, what they eat, what they drink, sleep, what they're allowing in their mind, what they're watching, what they're doing, you know, what they're doing with their bodies. And so the empowerment thing is huge. And so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So what I thought was interesting is when COVID hit back in March, February-ish of 2020, earlier that data right around that time said two big things: those with higher levels of body fat and obesity, and those with predispositions or early or manifested diabetes. So insulin resistance and obesity were associated with much higher, worse outcome with COVID. But a lot of people weren't talking about that. They were simply shutting down society, distancing, shutting down schools, businesses, except for corporations, shutting down, you know, churches and places of worship. And so I was like, gosh, why aren't people talking about the elephant in the room? It's affecting the elderly, who are predominantly, in the people that were getting most affected were obese and insulin resistant. Yes, many people who didn't have those characteristics did get sick and passed away. There's no question. But we weren't empowered with how to then strengthen yourself as much as possible against this possible infection. We It could have empowered people, I believe, by telling them to increase their vitamin D3 level with more sun exposure and or supplementation under the direction of a physician. I believe lowering body fat would have benefited a lot of people. But when they shut down society and shut down schools and gyms, they actually found that most people gained weight because they were eating more processed food and more sugar and getting less sun exposure and less exercise. So it's as if like the method for what they wanted to do to help try and stop the spread of this virus infection, it had many secondary effects which we're still kind of seeing the fruits of, and now we've got all-cause mortality going up all over the world, and the question is why? It's probably multifactorial for many reasons. So if we can empower people with better ways of eating, better ways of thinking, better ways of taking care of their body, then we've got less of these issues to worry about. And you'll fight viruses better, you'll fight bacteria better. I'm not saying there's not a reason for medication and all those other things. There's definitely a place for that. But if, as an individual, I want to be empowered. And I want you to be empowered as individuals, as families, as communities, because then you're less at risk for falling victim to delusion, deception, and fear.
Yeah, that's a big thing. You just hit on this too. I think we can talk about this a little bit, but the negative impact of the lockdowns and how communities were separated. And community is such a vital part, like having a core group of people that you meet with regularly, and you can confide in and have fun with, recreate, and all that was stripped away. And I think we're seeing such negative results because of that, and we're kind of we're at a point where we've got to build that back, and we're seeing a lot of that now. And I'm thankful we're in a place where we can do that freely now. And talk about the importance of community and how we saw the negative effects of the lack of that through COVID.
We're communal beings. Like we're meant to touch each other, to high five and shake hands and hug. And because then what happens is our feel-good hormones get stimulated when we're in physical connection with other people. Not only that, our microbiome gets transferred. We actually transfer bacteria that help benefit our immune system and our bodily functions by transmission of microbes. And so the point is, when you're not in that, you actually have just more disbalance in your physiology and your physical ecosystem. So I think that stripping away community is terrible for health individually and as a society. So now again, does that mean having diseased people being all around if they've got this terrible infection? It's challenging. I believe in definitely isolating to a certain extent those who are infected, but the point is shutting down society didn't seem practical or logical. And what we can see now is it really didn't change much. It kind of delayed the inevitable. The virus was going to go around the country and the world like it did, despite our best efforts. And it's not to say we shouldn't have public health efforts. There's no question we need that to a certain extent. But I believe individual empowerment should be primary. And there's a tension between individual physician to patient care and corporate public health. There's a definite tension because what's best for the individual is not always best for the population. And what's best for the population may not always be better for the individual. But the Western Hemisphere and the Western civilization is based on individual liberty and individual rights. So there's a tension there, but that requires discourse and discussion. They shut down discourse and discussion. That's another big part. That goes back to
freedom
liberty.
of speech.
Freedom of speech.
It's huge. We saw definitely that was attacked, and a lot of people's freedom to speak was shut down. A lot of people got canceled during COVID, and you could see that it was just not a good way to run things and for things to unfold. So and they've got some good experience with that and been able to fight for freedom of speech specifically within healthcare, and I'm thankful for you doing that and proud of you for doing that. And if you want to speak on that a little, that'd be great.
I think medical freedom of speech in Florida is being protected by legislation that was just recently signed by the governor, and we're thankful for legislators and the governor for doing that and protecting that in Florida. We believe Florida is an impact state that is a powerful state providing the environment to have the freest business owners, the freest doctors, the freest patients, the freest parents, the freest individuals, and so we're very thankful for that. But yeah, so that's kind of what I see from that perspective. Yeah.
Sure, we could keep going, but I know it's a lot. But thank you for answering that and taking the time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for listening in on this discussion with Jason and I. And look forward to having more content here for you. Thank you.